Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and welcome to another McDuff's Mindfields. This morning, I think I'm going to kind of confine it to one topic, and that is to follow up on George Webb's reporting on the presence of Azov Brigade at the invasion of the Capitol from the mall entrance, and his reporting in his video, and plus another reporter who he referred to, and you can see him if you go to George's Twitter today for that reference, are bringing in enough evidence for us to consider the possibility that the actual Azov Brigade itself was involved in the assault on the Capitol. Now, Azov Battalion, I should say. You see here, and Andy, because thanks again for Andy for being here and for supporting the channel in so many ways. Azov Battalion, and you can see their insignia there. It's a mercenary army, a militia, self-described, but it's also part of what they call the Ukrainian Defense Forces, and that is the acknowledged Nazis that fight against the Russian, so-called Russian separatists, where it's the division of Ukraine between those that want to be Russians and those that want to be Ukrainians. But this, of course, is all a operation, which, as we look back in our historical studies, we recognize is one of those Lord Palmerston style false flags. It's like what you might call a dual false flag, in that on the one side, you have activists who are against Russia, and on the other side, you have activists that are for Russia, and you finance them both so as to create conflict and help you achieve your financial goals. And if we now, with the perspective of history, let's go back and consider from our Screaming Ospreys book train, this very important book right here, which was my first introduction to what we're saying. It's called Blowback by Christopher Simpson. The first full account of America's recruitment of Nazis and its disastrous effect on our domestic and foreign policy. And it was in reading this book that I came to understand that these collaborationist armies, the Nazi collaborationists, are being imported into the United States for political reasons. And then we read from Christopher Simpson how they were brought into cities to create voting blocks to ensure the election of President Eisenhower in 1952, where usually that voting area would have voted Democratic. Well, who were these armies, these collaborationist armies? Well, there was one in just about every ethnic community around Nazi Germany and on the borders of Russia. And the one that has been the most long-lived has been the Ukrainian. And there was one called the OUN, and then there is the other one, which is now the Azov Army. And this was from a man named Michael Lebed, Lebed, a notorious collaborationist, a Nazi, who the CIA imported into the United States. And supposedly he was working for the CIA. That was, decades and decades ago. So why? Well, it's all part of the coup, the ongoing coup to take over the United States by these intelligence agencies. And this, as has been identified by Harley Schlanger and many others at LaRouche Organization and elsewhere, is a British intelligence operation to take down the Republic, to replace it with cartels and top-down management and the absence of individual rights. Excuse me a second. So as Professor Hamamoto said last night, Team W is unfolding everything, and realized that I really didn't know that what I was going to find when I read this book, Blowback, but you find right here the roots of what happened at Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2021. Ukrainians, the Azov army. Well, first of all, let's read an article by Max Blumenthal, which I want to share with you now. And if you want to get that up on the screen so people can see the headline and some of the pictures there. This is an article written by Max Blumenthal in the Real News Network, January 18th, 2018, so 2 years ago. And the article's title is "The U.S. is arming and assisting neo-Nazis in Ukraine while Congress debates prohibition." And then there's a picture, left to right. Members of the Azov Battalion offer a Sieg Heil salute. And on the right, U.S. military advisors meet with Azov commanders in the field in November of 2017. And here's the text. Last November, an American military inspection team visited the Azov Battalion on the front lines of the Ukrainian civil war to discuss logistics and deepening cooperation. Images of the encounter showed American Army officers poring over maps with their Ukrainian counterparts, palling around and ignoring the Nazi-inspired Wolf Angel patches emblazoned on their sleeves. That's that patch you saw it's like a backwards N with a vertical line through it. Azov is a militia that has been incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard and is considered one of the most effective units in the field against pro-Russian separatists. But it is also widely known as a bastion of neo-Nazism within the ranks of the Ukrainian military that has been criticized by international human rights groups, tied to an international fascist network, and even a major terror plot. According to Lower Class magazine, a leftist German publication, Azov maintains a semi-underground outfit called the Misanthropic Division that recruits heavily among the ranks of neo-Nazi youth in France, Germany, and Scandinavia. Foreign fighters are promised training with heavy weapons, including tanks, at Ukrainian camps filled with fascist fellow travelers. They even include military veterans like Mikhail Skillet, a Swedish former army sniper turned neo-Nazi volunteer for Azov. After World War II, the victors wrote the history, Skillet told the BBC. Quote, "They decided that it's always a bad thing to say I am white and I am proud," unquote. Foreign Azov volunteers are driven by the call of the Reconquista, or the mission to place Eastern European nations under the control of a white supremacist dictatorship modeled after the Nazi Reichskommissariat dictatorship that ruled Ukraine during the World War II. The mission is promoted effusively by Azov's chief ideologue, Andrei Biletsky, a veteran fascist organizer who leads the Social National Assembly in Ukraine's parliament. Biletsky's assembly has pledged to outlaw interracial contacts and vowed, quote, to prepare Ukraine for further expansion and to struggle for the liberation of the entire white race from the domination of the internationalist speculative capital, unquote. Perhaps the most notorious of the racist European youth drawn to the military training camps of Ukraine was a 25-year-old French farm worker named Grégoire Monteau. In June 2016, Monteau, is it Monteau? It's Muto, Grégoire Muto. And in 2016, Muto was arrested on Ukraine's border by the country's SBU security services with a staggering arsenal of assault rifles, thousands of rounds of ammunition, and 125 kilograms of TNT explosives. He even managed to gain possession of 2 anti-tank grenade launchers. Driven by hardcore neo-Nazi ideology, Muto planned to blow up a, quote, Muslim mosque, a Jewish synagogue, tax collection organizations, police patrol units, unquote, and attack the Euro 2016 soccer championship. According to the SBU, the would-be terrorist had been in communication with military units fighting in Donbass, the eastern Ukrainian area where Azov maintains its training camps. While mobilizing racist youth across Europe, Azov has also managed to foster a warm relationship with the American military. In one photo posted to Azov's website last November, an American military officer can be seen shaking hands with an Azov officer whose uniform was emblazoned with the Nazi-inspired Wolfsangel patch that serves as the militia's symbol. The images highlighted a burgeoning relationship that has been largely conducted in secret, but whose disturbing details are slowly emerging. Though Washington has not embarked on anything in Ukraine like the billion-dollar train and equip program it implemented in Syria to promote regime change through a proxy force of so-called moderate rebels, there are clear and disturbing similarities between the two projects, just as heavy weapons ostensibly intended for the CIA-backed Free Syrian Army went straight into the hands of Salafi jihadi insurgent forces, including ISIS. American weapons in Ukraine are flowing directly to the extremists of Azov. And once again, in its single-minded determination to turn up the heat on Russia, Washington seems willing to ignore the unsettling political orientations of its frontline proxies. In recent months, a wide spectrum of observers of the Ukrainian civil war have documented the transfer of heavy weapons made in the USA to the Azov Battalion and right under the nose of the U.S. State Department. Made in Texas, tested by Azov. The story of how American arms began flowing toward the Nazi-inspired militia began in October 2016 when the Texas-based Airtronic company announced a contract to deliver $5.5 million worth of PSRL-1 rocket-propelled grenade launchers to, quote, an allied European military customer, unquote. In June 2017, photos turned up on Azov's website showing its fighters testing PSRL-1 grenade launchers in the field. The images raised questions about whether Ukraine was Airtronic's unnamed, quote, customer. 2 months later, the pro-Russian military analysis site Southfront published a leaked contract indicating that 100 PSRL launchers worth $554,000, about a tenth of the total deal, had been produced in partnership with a Ukrainian arms company for distribution to the country's fighting units. In an interview last December with U.S.-backed Voice of America, Airtronic Chief Operating Officer Richard Van Diver emphasized that the sale of grenade launchers was authorized through, quote, very close coordination with the U.S. Embassy, with the U.S. State Department, with the U.S. Pentagon, and with the Ukrainian government. Now, here's the reference. I'm going to skip a couple paragraphs ahead just to move along. Your struggle is our struggle. The American government's collaboration with committed Nazi ideologues to undercut Russian geopolitical goals is not new, nor has it been a particularly well-kept secret. In his 1988 book-length expose, Blowback, investigative journalist Christopher Simpson lifted the cover off the CIA's program of rehabilitating former assets of Nazi Germany, including documented war criminals, and revealed how it employed them counter the spread of communism in Europe. According to Simpson, the CIA recruited Mykola Lebed, a Gestapo-trained leader of the Ukrainian OUN militia, who oversaw the torture and slaughter of Jews in Krakow, to help bolster West Germany's intelligence services in 1947. 2 years later, the CIA smuggled Lebed into the US under a false name. He was promptly hired by the Pentagon and dispatched on widely promoted speaking tours that rallied support for Ukrainian guerrillas. For the next several decades, Lebed advanced the anti-communist cause through the Prologue Research Corporation, a New York City-based publishing house that was eventually revealed as a CIA front. Massive torch-lit rallies pour out into the streets of Kiev on regular occasions, showcasing columns of Azov members marching beneath the Nazi-inspired Wolfsangel banner that serves as the militia's symbol. Author and columnist Lev Golinkin noted that the neo-Nazis who violently paraded through Charlottesville, Virginia last year bore flags emblazoned with another symbol displayed by Azov, the Sonnengrad, or the Nazi SS-inspired Black Sun. Across Ukraine, Nazi collaborators like Stepan Bandera have been celebrated with memorials and rallies proclaiming them as national heroes. Bandera was the commander of the wartime militia, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, the OUNB, which fought alongside Nazi Germany against the Soviet Union. Despite his OUNB militia's role in the massacre of Jews and ethnic Poles during the war, including a pogrom that left 7,000 Jews dead in Lviv, a major boulevard in Kiev has been named for Bandera. In today's Ukraine, even mainstream nationalists revere Bandera as a freedom fighter. I want to make a comment about this torchlit parade, because if you remember the images that we saw from Charlottesville, Virginia, maybe 3 years ago now, yeah, I saw those crazy things, and then it would say blood and soil. That's them. That's the Ukrainians. And now couple that with the reports that John Brennan has been importing these Ukrainian militants into the United States to the tune of 20,000 or more. Now I think, oh, that's where they got all those nice, clean-cut looking white guys, with the military haircuts, to walk around. And no wonder all the tiki torches are the same brand. And when are the people of Virginia going to realize that this was not a GOP or Donald Trump driven riot, or whatever you want to call it, the white power rally? No, this was a psyop. This was a false flag. This was probably populated with a lot of these John Brennan imports from Ukraine. And then isn't that consistent with what George Webb and George Eliason are reporting? That in the case of January 6th, in order to destroy to break up the conference, the committee meetings over fraud in the election, to upset the table before the evidence was assessed was done by people from the same organization, the Azov Battalion. So now think about Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son and their investment in Burisma. I have to tell you, this article from Max Blumenthal goes on, and it's all full of great stuff, but I'm not going to try to read the entire thing right now. What I want to do is to go on to another article I wanted to show you. Let me get that up. Here's another bit of historical information that I think is really, really important. I'm just going to Wikipedia this time for the Antifa Germany article. This article is about the wider far-left political current in Germany. It is not to be confused with Antifaschiste Aktion, or the German resistance to Nazism. So let's go to Antifaschiste Aktion. Antifaschiste Aktion was a militant anti-fascist organization in the Weimar Republic started by members of the Communist Party of Germany that existed from 1932 to 1933. Now, I put it to you, I haven't done the research, but I bet if we look into the Communist Party of Germany in 1932 and 1933, we're going to find that this is a false flag operation, probably being run by the British. Maybe, I could be wrong, but think about how all of these anti-Fa things have the same symbols. We have our anti-fascism, anti-Fa people, but if you go back to a picture, which, Andy, if you can put up the Wikipedia for Antifaschistische Aktion, maybe not, that's hard even to spell. But you see, you've probably seen them before. The symbols of this organization are simply resonant. They're the same. And so Antifa in America is related to Antifa in Germany. And Antifa in Germany is related to the Azov battalions. That's why in this Charlottesville march, you saw the Antifa symbols, and you also saw the white supremacy Azov battalion symbols. Yeah, there it is. Just scroll down a little bit and you'll see that red symbol on the right-hand side, Andy, that I wanted to show. Hang on, let's blow up that picture of the Karl Liebknecht house, because this makes my point. You see right there in the middle of it, that Antifaschistische Aktion symbol, and how different is that from Antifa? None. There's no difference. They claim it's different, but look at it. (1932-33). So what I'm thinking is this is all coming out. Yeah, go ahead and scroll down to where they have the little red flag. Die rote Fahne, the red flag. There it is, the black and red flag. See that? Now, there's one more article, and this one is from the LaRouche article, organization that I wanted to share with you. And this is an article by Barbara Boyd and Dennis Speed in Executive Intelligence Review, October 11th, 2019. So this is before the election, and it is a expose of Joe Biden and Ukraine, which written before the election, but on October the 2nd of 2019. Okay, that's a year and a half. That's a year ago, plus a couple months. So way before the election. And she begins by saying that Joe Biden 2020 presidential campaign is now finished as a result of these Ukraine revelations. Well, it turns out that she was wrong. He wasn't finished. They pushed him through by any means necessary, didn't they? But I think it's really good to read what Barbara Boyd and Dennis Speed have written. So let's dig into this a little bit. As I learn more and more each day, I am coming to the conclusion that what is taking place is not an impeachment, it is a coup. Quote unquote, these are the words of Donald Trump. And this is increasingly becoming the inevitable conclusion, even before the Barr and other investigations are completed, which anyone that confronts the present crisis must consider, even the most perplexed. Just as FDR faced a fascist banker's coup against his presidency in 1934, so Donald Trump faces one today in 2019, led by Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, as well as by a treasonous faction of American intelligence now being deployed through the former Democratic Party's campaign for impeachment of the President of the United States. It is through looking at the presidential investigation of Ukraine and of Joe Biden that the ugly truth about the banker's coup is best revealed at the moment. Banker's coup is a reference to 1933, I think maybe 1934, but it was the Smedley Butler exposed it. And this was the DuPonts and some other of the behind the scenes wealthy people that just decided that Mussolini had a better idea than Benjamin Franklin and George Washington as far as how to govern people. And so the idea was to replace our republic with a fascist dictatorship. And that was in 1933-34 time. And Major General Smedley Butler, Marine General, twice winner of the Medal of Honor, stood up and said no, and went to President Roosevelt and said, look what these guys are doing. And they stopped the coup. And so what our authors here are reminding us of is exactly what happened in 1933 and 4 happening to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump saw it. He said, it looks more like a coup than an impeachment. Yeah, and for the banker's coup, definitely see Housatonic Live's great archives on that. The President of the United States is committed, as his oath of office requires, to finding out the role foreigners played in the 2016 election, meddling directed against him by the Obama White House and John Brennan's CIA. The big question is whether the British were running the whole show of illegal surveillance and black propaganda against Trump centrally, or whether Obama and Brennan also farmed it out to other nations. This investigation threatens to pull the entire filthy Anglo-American intelligence apparatus down, including Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, who has recently described the intelligence community as, quote, her wheelhouse. Is Pelosi now the acting chairman of, quote, the intelligence agency formerly known as the Democratic Party? Obama, Biden, Hillary Clinton, and their entourage used the awesome powers of Five Eyes, surveillance and propaganda, called in the intelligence trade, public diplomacy, first to attempt to rig the 2016 election, which failed, and then to undermine Trump's presidency. They then claimed that all of their illegal activities were committed in the service of chasing a plot by the Russians to undermine the elections and blow up the world. The 1950-style Russian plot story was manufactured to prevent Trump from making peace with Russia, which is against the unnatural globalist national interests of Wall Street and the City of London financial district. The City of London and Wall Street financial houses, which the intelligence mandarins serve, are on the edge of another blowout, bigger than the 2007 to 2008. Bank of England Governor Mark Carney called for a financial regime change in Jackson Hole, Wyoming in late August. That means take aim at the United States sovereign national credit system. They know Donald Trump won't tolerate that. Trump stated at the United Nations, quote, "The future belongs not to the globalists. The future belongs to the patriots." The Green New Deal, with these bankers, not the environmentalists, originated, is nothing but a return to ecologism and the zero population growth schemes of the 1930s European-style eco-fascism. The Green New Deal is designed for new massive austerity and genocide to be imposed on Africa, Asia, and South America that is supposed to somehow appear to be a heroic defense of, quote, Mother Nature, unquote. The shutdown of fossil fuels is the only way, other than thermonuclear war, to reduce the population by billions in the short term. That is why Mark Carney, Michael Bloomberg, Christine Lagarde, and others want a supranational, quote, green bankers dictatorship. Trump, on the other hand, has proposed space exploration to the moon and Mars to discover the higher laws that can power our terrestrial economy, reindustrialization of the United States on a modern infrastructure platform, and nation-state to nation-state treaties. Durable human survival requires rejecting totally the globalist framework that has been destroying the U.S. and increasing the risk of world war. So what are you, the American people, prepared to do about it? Before you make the potentially fatal mistake of deciding to not get involved, read on. Pardon me a second. This next section, Biden, Obama, Hillary support neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And this is where I think it all does get tied together, once again, by the writing of Barbara Boyd and Dennis Speed. In October 2019, they said this. The Joe Biden scandal concerning Ukraine goes far, far beyond the millions of dollars awarded to Biden's son, Hunter, for use of the Biden name on various dirty corporate boards in Ukraine and China. As of February 2014, Joe Biden was the U.S. point man on the Ukraine coup atrocity. The 2014 Ukraine Maidan uprising was aimed at creating a violently anti-Russian, IMF-controlled, that's International Monetary Fund-controlled regime on Russia's border, thereby creating a hair trigger for thermonuclear war. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton surpassed the most right-wing of neocons, working directly with known fascists for this purpose. An estimated $5.1 billion in U.S. taxpayers' dollars was spent on this effort, which set the world on a march toward thermonuclear Armageddon. Donald Trump's election and his promise to seek positive relationships relations with Russia temporarily stopped the mad war drive, the shock troops used by Joe Biden and Victoria Nuland to pull off the coup against Ukraine's duly elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, were certifiable neo-Nazis, supporters of the World War II Ukrainian butcher Stefan Bandera, who mass murdered thousands of Poles and Jews. The full dossier on that Nazi coup in Ukraine was reported in a package of articles in the February 24th, 2017 issue of EIR. The Ukrainian-American network surrounding the Chalupa sisters that works with the Democratic National Committee, the Department of Justice, and the State Department to destroy Trump's candidacy also supports Bandera's legacy. Chalupas. Nazi devils in the details. Who were the Biden's friends in Ukraine? Papa Joe made various forays to Ukraine to impose shock austerity on the population under terms dictated by the IMF. Biden personally assisted in the reshuffling of Ukraine's oligarchs so that only those who were rabidly anti-Russian survived. Thousands of Ukrainians died as the result of the civil war in eastern Ukraine and IMF austerity in western Ukraine, while the looting of the economy by the oligarchs was protected by Joe and his friends. Burisma Holdings, which hired Hunter Biden, is nominally owned by Mykola Zlochevsky, an oil and gas oligarch. It is actually owned, however, by a notorious Ukrainian gangster, Igor Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky has been a significant supporter of the new Ukraine president, Volodymyr Zelensky, despite Kolomoisky's well-earned reputation as a fraudster, violent thug, and overall international crook. It is Kolomoisky who has provided the most substantial funding for the war in eastern Ukraine and the Azov Battalion. Following Hunter Biden's receipt of his Ukraine riches, Kolomoisky was removed from lists banning his travel to the U.S., and his notorious career was whitewashed, despite the fact that national and international financial agencies still viewed him as an entrenched crook. Hence, the president might have been referring to this when he questioned Zelensky in the infamous transcript as to whether the, quote, same people, unquote, were around him as were involved in the corrupt dealings with Hunter Biden. In June 2018, Michael Carpenter, Joe Biden's chief sidekick in his Ukrainian perfidies, brought Andrei Parubyi, then the neo-Nazi Speaker of Ukraine Parliament, to meet with the U.S. Congress about lethal aid to Ukraine to continue the genocide in eastern Ukraine. When journalist Max Blumenthal confronted Carpenter with the fact that Parubyi had founded two neo-Nazi parties, the Socialist National Party and the Patriot of Ukraine Party, Carpenter said that Blumenthal was pitching Russian propaganda. Papa Joe's Ukraine activities have had a devastating blowback worldwide, including in the United States. 4 white nationalists who trained with the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion, now part of Ukraine's National Guard, participated in the August 11th to 12th, 2017 Unite the Right white supremacist riots in Charlottesville, Virginia. Well, there it is. They just proved there's 4 of them that were in Charlottesville. Azov Battalion in Charlottesville. Terry McAuliffe, you opened the door for foreign terrorists to march through Charlottesville, and you haven't been held accountable. Terry McAuliffe opened this city, gave him the keys to the city in order to create the false impression that these are American white supremacists. It's a psyop. Wake up, Charlottesville. Wake up. Papa Joe's Ukraine activities have had devastating blowback worldwide, including the United States. 4 white nationalists who trained with the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion, now part of Ukraine's National Guard, participated in the August 11-12, 2017 Unite the Right white supremacist riots in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand, whose manifesto influenced recent mass shooters in the United States, also says he visited and trained with the Azov Battalion. William Jarrett Smith, the U.S. Army soldier recently arrested for plotting bomb attacks on American media outlets and Democratic Party politicians, was also an Azov trainee. So, when Joe Biden opened his vacuous campaign for president with gauzy footage from Charlottesville, proclaiming himself the hero in a fight for America against what he claims Donald Trump represents, think about what you were bamboozled to think and what was actually going on. This, I think, is an incredible opening for our movement to restore our republic in this country. Because when George Webb and others are there making the videos, and we identify the faces with facial recognition, and the world can see that these people are not MAGA people, as the media has been trying to beat into everybody's heads ever since January 6th. This is a Trump coup. Trump inspired them. Trump wanted them to bring, guns and knives and nunchuck and chains and everything. No, this is a coup, a unrolling coup right now. That's why they have to fortify themselves behind those 11-foot barriers with concertina wire, because they are engaged in a coup against the United States of America, and they know it. Am I wrong? I hope so. But I think we have to face it. And that's all I got this morning. I want you to think about this very seriously, this Azov Battalion, going all the way back to World War II, where the CIA imports the genocidal Jew and Pole murdering Michael Lebed into the United States to continue doing his ops right here in our country, courtesy Allen Dulles, John Foster Dulles, and their gang of traitors. Well, that's what I got today. Hope you all have a good afternoon. We'll see you tonight. Tonight, I'm going to do a special reading, by the way. I'm going to be reading I'm going to do a 1-hour version of The Nazi War on Cancer by Robert Proctor. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's an expose of the fact that Nazi doctors knew how to avoid cancer. And then you contrast what they knew and what they recommended to the people of the Aryan nation of Germany would have saved us an awful lot of cancer deaths after World War II if only we had followed the advice of the Nazi doctors given to the Nazi population in the 30s and 40s, leading me to suspect that all of this death from cigarettes and everything else is not accidental. That depopulation of the United States has been an agenda item for the big banks for quite some time. So we'll talk about it tonight. Thanks again for being with me.